Hey, old Josh here, and this is my review of The Rum Diary. Now, this is actually a movie I've been looking forward to for a long time. I knew about this when it went into production, and that was a few years ago. It was supposed to be released last year even, so needless to say all this, I've been looking forward to this movie. And yet, it's a very tricky movie to actually review, because for one, my memories of many of the specifics of the book have faded through time. But on the other hand, I still remember portions of the book enough to compare it, I would like to think. And being a huge fan of Hunter S. Thompson, but understanding a lot of his shortcomings as a writer and a person, it's an interesting movie to watch. It really is, specifically because of the way they adapt the story. I'm just going to dive right into this. I'll try to make as few assumptions as I can going along, but you'll have to bear with me. I will say up front, this movie is going to be a lot more enjoyable if you know a little bit about the author. You don't even have to have read the Rum Diary necessarily, because a lot of its themes that he plays on time and time again. But specifically, his life, a lot of Hunter S. Thompson's work is semi-autobiographical, and the Rum Diary is no exception. And from that standpoint, I like that in the process of adaptation, they've added this huge subplot that was in the original novel, but more as a periphery element. And they've brought it to the forefront. They've made it a lot bigger than it was before. And that is the development of the Hunter S. Thompson persona or character or person in general. His style, the way he thinks. And that's really interesting, the way they go about it. And that is why I think actually a lot of critics are not liking this movie. And I'm not saying the movie is flawless, aside from that, but I think there's two things that really make this movie difficult for people to like. And that's a shame. One, it's a mood movie. There's really not a whole lot of story, and what story there is fairly disconnected from itself. It can seem, if you don't take it in the proper context, just a constant stream of endless events that just don't really have any coherency. But at the same time, it is also a movie that requires you have a little knowledge of the author and, again, his subjects. Now, if you like Hunter S. Thompson, chances are you will like this movie if you understand that they have to adapt things. I will say there has been a good number of changes made from the book, the original book, The Rum Diary by Hunter S. Thompson, but at the same time, I think it works actually quite well as a film. What characters they've excised have been incorporated into others for fairly good effect. There's actually one thread in IMDb that I will link people to in the video description. And for people that are wondering about these characters being taken out, it explains it in decent enough detail. It kind of concludes what I conclude. But to be short, I just think it works as a movie, and to be perfectly honest, while it may be different from the book, I still think the Rum Diary movie, as a whole, retains what I enjoyed about the book and what the book was all about. And keeping the spirit of the novel is much more important than keeping the details of the novel. The Rum Diary is not a huge book, so yes, maybe they could have straight adapted it, but books and films are two very different mediums, and I don't think it works quite the same. The main things I do remember about the Rum Diary and really have internalized from it, one, the sense of place in the book was really fantastic. The mood, again, Hunter S. Thompson was really fantastic at building up specific moods, and the Rum Diary was a great example of this kind of doomed pessimistic mood here he has throughout his career, frankly, but to a more somber degree. And the fact that the whole context he always plays on, specifically in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as many people know, is Death of the American Dream. Not really the American Dream in the Rum Diary. It's kind of the sense of a sense of outward paradise and exploiting that paradise to the point where it's no longer paradise. In other words, you can't go to a better place, because when you go to that better place, we're conforming it, you're changing it. Things like that. There's really a whole larger argument, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But that's basically the point, that paradise exploited, the dream being illusion, and all three of those things I think the book does really well. The production on this is fantastic. Purportedly $45 million went into it, and you can see it. Small details, everything looks beautifully lived in. There's a lot of detail in the actual just small scenes. You can see things, there's like bits about the Eisenhower administration, about Ike and Dick, and there's the thing with Nixon, of course, that they add. And it all works really well to build a really nice sense of place, and the mood particularly, oh man, it really gets you in there. And because this is not particularly story-focused, it really lingers on the details. And again, it's a hit-or-miss thing as far as audience expectations go, but I think it worked really well in this case because it really helped the thematic climax of the movie and the thematic point of the movie. And that brings us to the third point here, in that the movie, I think, definitely preserves the themes of the book, the overarching themes, and where they go is generally the same, regardless of some of the fairly large changes. Like I said, at this point I want to discuss a couple of the details of the book. I'm not really going to spoil too much, but I will be talking about the overall perspective of the book, so I might mention the end a little. So if you want to read the book, you know what? No. Watch this anyway, because I like to. So I'll try my best not to spoil it. I'm really just going to give you overarching impressions. The main things that they've done. There's a main character that's been excised and kind of tossed about to other characters, and again, I have no problem with that. And the main thing that they've added again is this large subplot, is the development of Hunter S. Thompson, or Paul Kemp. The main character himself, throughout the book, is now really expanded in the movie. You see a lot more of it, and I think that actually works. I think it makes it more interesting, more involving, as it were. The Rum Diary, I like to think, has the structure of a road trip movie without the road trip. The road trip movie, all the scenes in particular, have their own purpose, but are not necessarily all coherently building from one to another, and yet they all contribute to the final climax of the movie, to the final effect of the movie, and that's very much the case with this movie. I think the original Rum Diary was great for what it was. Don't get me wrong, it's a great book. I do enjoy it a lot. But I think adding this to a movie gives it a better and more enticing structure. And they've definitely applied a lot more structure to this movie. I think that works, to be perfectly honest. You can never win with these people. I'm reading the message boards, and some people are saying, oh yeah, no, they've changed it too much, and they've given it basically this structure, and saying, oh yeah, it should be more like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because that had very little structure. It followed the book, the structure. And my biggest problem with the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas movie is that while it's a really fun movie, and a good movie, I think, it very strangely paced for a film in general. There's not really a whole lot of pacing. It's just things that happen. If you like things that happen, all the things that happen are good, and it still has a good theme to it going behind it, but at any rate, like I said, the Rum Diary definitely has more of that. I think it's better for it. It makes the movie more interesting on an intellectual level too, because if you know the author, it gives you a lot more to see the development of this pre-Gonzo character, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing too, that are fans of these other ones. This is not necessarily a Gonzo work. This is about the development of that, and this movie just takes it to the next logical step, more involving Hunter S. Thompson himself, the character, and person, as it were. But suffice to say, the ending of the movie does differ quite a bit from the book. The book is a very pessimistic, very bleak affair, very somber most of the time. It has many moments of hilarity as well, but overall it's kind of a feeling of being doomed. And the book ends on a very, very downbeat note, more or less. The movie gets to the same point, where there's that sense of oppression, but at the same time, or ubiquitous oppression, but at the same time, it just doesn't, it adds a more upbeat part to it. And I have no problem necessarily with that, because it actually goes off generally in the same direction. Again, you get the same kind of feelings, so no huge problems with that. But there's one thing I will note. There's a text crawl. The end. I think that was wholly unnecessary, let's say that. I don't think it kills the movie, but it definitely diminishes the ending. Overall, though, I think the story structure of the movie does really fantastic. There's some really good scenes in here. It feels really lived in, and it still flows fairly nicely, even if the second half does drag slightly. Now, I do have a little bit more to say about this film, so I'm just going to stop here, come back in a second. Unfortunately, my recorder can only record 10 minutes, so Alright, now that we've got that pesky recorder pesky recorder limit out of the way, I want to continue blabbering on about this. And this is, again, I realize, a very long review, but this is a movie that, honestly, I was intending to make this long review on, because I have a lot to say about this. It's something I've really been looking forward to. I mean, if a new Godzilla movie comes out, fuck me, that's going to be 30 minutes long, that review. But, irregardless, like I said, right where I left off, I think the plot generally does a very good job, and it's bolstered by a very good cast. I think a lot of the actors really really hit the nail on the head as far as it comes to the characters. Johnny Depp does a good job as always. Again, it's a slightly different persona than Fear and Loathing, where the buffalo roam, so don't necessarily go in expecting that. Aaron Eckhart, fantastic as always. He's a really great actor. He's one of those actors that I see him in everything, and he's not usually the main player, but I always enjoy his presence. So I actually do wish he would take a lot more leading roles in movies that I like. So irregardless, though, Lauderman, fantastic. Richard Jenkins. Sala, really fantastic as a sidekick, more or less. All the characters. Moberg is played to perfection, really. A little over the top in that case. My only qualm I have to make is actually not with the acting, but getting back to the story itself. It seems like there's a few changes that they made that I don't think were entirely necessary. For instance, the upping of Moberg's presence. I understand why it's in the film. Thematically, it actually works if you think about it, but it does get a little overplayed. He's in the movie just a little too much, and there's actually one tripping scene. It just feels out of place, frankly. It seems like an allusion to Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, as if they threw it in there just to get it in the trailer. It doesn't kill the movie, because it's one of those things, too, where you think and you're like, well, it does technically work, because, again, this movie is a lot more about the development of Hunter S. Thompson, his character's career, and his sense of journalistic integrity in general, but it still feels a little tacked on. I can't help but say anything more than that. As well, there's a couple of scenes where, like I said, the last part of this review, it goes on a little long in the second half. It travels on far past where the original book ended, so it's a little confusing, I guess, in that right. But again, it gets to pretty much the same place, and it ends on an in memoriam note, which is very nice to do, I think. Overall, my only real complaints, I think, are the fact that a couple random scenes, the text crawl at the end, just take it out. Honestly, I don't know why it was there. It serves no purpose other than to either elucidate the obvious or demystify things that shouldn't have been demystified. Or maybe it's some clever allusion to the author himself. I've been thinking about that, but then the whole thing with marriage, whatever. Doesn't matter. You'll see the movie. Tell me what you think if you do. And you'll know what I mean when you do see it, I think, if you're following this. One last thing about the movie. Like I said, this is a very well-produced movie. The sound in this, all the sound effects are fantastic. Really, a lot of small background sounds really do the trick. But most of all, the music in this movie. Very period, great for the era. A lot of it's just instrumental, but honestly, that's perfectly fine. I wasn't expecting a rip-rolling soundtrack here. It really gets the job done. Really fantastic. Definitely one I would listen to on its own if I was in a specific mood. Overall, let's end this huge rambling review that I'm doing. I'm sure only 1% of you are probably even watching at this point. So let's just say that The Rum Diary is a really good movie, I think. Honestly, I think critics are being a little harsh on it. I can see that it has its flaws. It drags in the second half. Some questionable scene choices, and the ending may bring down the movie. But I think if you're a fan of Hunter S. Thompson, and if you're a fan of the idea in general, I think it does work. I think there's some great acting. I think there's some great production value behind it. I think it's worth seeing. If nothing else, it is a better option than other things in theaters right now. So take that for what it will. There you go.